you doing?
You ready?
Yes. These look very nice. This pair of shorts look very nice with this pair of shorts.
That does look very nice. You made a good outfit.
Yeah. Video. I am.
Are you blowing bubbles with Poppy?
He's blowing bubbles everywhere.
That's where it's wet.
All right, we're going to the garden, Ben. What's up, guys? Today is August the 20th, and this morning I woke up and there's just the tiniest hint of fall in the air. It was kind of coolish this morning, and this is a little bit later than I normally do this. Normally we go ahead and rip out the summer garden by about the second week in August, so we're about a week and a half or so behind what I think I've done it the last few years. But that's how this whole gardening year has run. It's run a couple weeks behind. And today we are tearing out everything that is dead in the garden to make room and make way for the next wave of crops. So for this video, I'm just gonna kind of take you guys around. This is a little bit of a sad day for me. It always is. I can be happy, looking forward, but I always miss the garden when it goes. And the summer garden, of course, is lush. I actually love the winter garden and the fall garden just as much as the summer garden. It's just very different. It's not quite the lush and captivating thing that the summer garden is. So it's a little sad. It's a sad day. It's just part of it. Seasons change. Of course, we've done the garden tours throughout the year, and as we get everything transitioned, I'll start doing garden tours again as things start coming up and there's more to show. I've got two helper boys here. You gonna help me today?
Yes.
No.
But the melon's back there.
But the melon's back there. You wanna go check them out? There's
Well,
some.
They're dying, so we're gonna have to get rid of them.
Are y'all sad? Is it sad when it's time to take the summer garden out? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'm not sad about the tomatoes.
Are you sad, Ben? Yeah. That's how I feel
Well, we
too.
still have tons of. Do we gotta tear out the banana trees because they're taking so long?
No, the banana trees are fine.
Those are very good. Those are very fine.
Before we take a quick look at this, I want to encourage you guys, if this is your first year gardening, when things start to die, it is devastating. It really is. And it never stops being a little sad. Like, I still feel it's just a little bit bittersweet when the garden is coming out. Over time, it stops being quite as hard because you really learn how dependently the garden comes back. You know, like the seasons change, they come back around. And it really is empowering to kind of embrace the process. And that first year or two that you're gardening, you know, you run into issues. You might have, let's say you lost your tomatoes to disease, or a storm came through and you lost your garden for whatever reason. Or what?
Or is hailing?
Or hail, Toby said, or it's hailing. That's a really great example, Toby. That did happen to us. That did. We lost a lot of plants to hail one year. And so, like, it's devastating in the beginning because it's like, I've done all of this and now it's gone and it's over. But it's not really over, because your journey as a gardener, it spans over many years. Remember, we're not just growing a garden, we're growing as gardeners. And so everything that happens can grow us as gardeners. It can grow our wisdom, it can grow our experience. And over the course of the years, it gets a little bit easier to let each season go, because you know that there's another one coming. And this season will come back around. So it is sad, it's bittersweet, but it doesn't have to be devastating. It's disappointing, but it doesn't have to be devastating. Oh, here comes Ezzy too. Hey, Ezra.
Sit right here.
You sit right there? Y'all ready to go take a quick look at the garden one last time?
Yeah. One last time? But how many times have you taken a look at the garden?
We've taken a lot of looks. I don't know why this table is upside down.
You want to do what?
I didn't turn it upside down. I wonder if those plants really could have pulled. Surely not. Surely those didn't pull that over. Surely somebody turned it over. Did y'all turn that table upside down?
I know.
Yeah, I called this the Jumanji vine this year. Is that Kukuzi gourd? It's torn a bunch of stuff out. What is listed as our first frost date It's like November 7th to 10th is typically what it is. I'm at a little higher elevation because we live up on a ridge. I tend to go a week earlier because if the area drops below freezing up on this ridge, we will get frost before anybody around us does. So I'm very conservative in my planning, and I just kind of set my expectations for sooner. And then sometimes we don't get a frost until November 7th to 10th or even beyond that. But at least if it comes earlier, I won't be so heartbroken. So I just searched until October 31st, how many days are from now and then. I just put in how many days until October 31st, and it's 72 days. So I am going to kind of loosely plan on having about 70 days left until our first frost. Might get a little more than that. It might come earlier than that. In 70 days, I know that I can still plant green beans, and I know that I can still plant some squash. Other than that, anything frost tender, basil. I'll probably go ahead and plant some more basil. But other than that, anything frost tender, I'm not going to fool with putting in the garden because I don't think it'll have enough time to really produce much. So as I pull things out, I'm keeping in mind what I'm going to put back in here, and it's primarily going to be stuff that can live in freezing temperatures. The noodle beans here, before we tear these out, I'm gonna harvest a bunch of these seeds to save. Now, any of this stuff on the trellis is specifically things that like wind around the trellis like this. These can be difficult to get off these cattle panels. Oh my goodness. There's like a whole pile of sunflower seeds right here from squirrels stealing them out of the sunflower. I mean, just like a massive pile. That's funny. We'll probably end up with some volunteer sunflowers here next year. Anyway, squirrel. What you can do if you've got things that are really twisty, beans are hard to get off of cattle panels. Other things can be too. Like if you're growing cucumbers or melons or anything and they're really entwined on these panels, what I do is I come and take some snippers or pruners and I just cut these plants off right at the soil and just leave them for a few days. And what will happen is they will dry up, and it's a lot easier to tear them off when they're dried up. Additionally, if you're growing something like these noodle beans or any sort of beans and peas are both nitrogen fixers. And so if you cut the plant off at the soil and leave the root system down in the soil, it's going to break down and it's going to actually add a lot of nitrogen back to your soil. So you don't want to rip those out. You want to cut them off at the soil and let that add organic matter back to your soil. So some of these plants are staying. I've got beans on the side and okra. Those are still producing, so they're going to stay down here. These plants got sick, so we're just going to harvest what melons we can from them and tear these out. Kind of same thing down here. Look at these. They're like 3 dads tall. So we got a lot of sick plants. All of these are coming out. A lot of weeds. This little area here has the worst nutgrass infestation. Some old leeks that are all coming out. The dried corn stalks. Most of these beds are going to be really empty. Yeah. Okay, so you'll notice over here I've got this basil that is flowered. If I needed this space, I might take that basil out, but I don't. I'm gonna have a lot of space, so I'm just gonna leave that in. I might save some seeds from it, but primarily I'm just leaving that for the pollinators. That makes the pollinators happy. I also leave anything like zinnias, such as these. I just leave these. Thank you. I leave these in, so these will not be torn out. These are good for the bees. They're beautiful now. They might be falling over. A lot of times they start getting sick towards the end of the summer, but I just leave these wild zinnia patches in. So the cuckoozy vine has come to an end. That's gonna come out today. As well as a lot of this stuff. Now, like down here on the end, I have this catnip. It's all dried up, it's gone to seed. You pulling those out? We need to get the wagon or the wheelbarrow and fill it up so we can take those to the pigs, okay? Or you can throw those over to the chickens if you want to. So catnip is a perennial here in my zone. That means that it can live all the way through the winter and it can come back. However, this is a hot mess. It's just, it went to seed, it dried up. So I could save some seeds from this just by keeping these pods. And I'll probably save a little bit. I'm not gonna save just a whole lot. What we're gonna do is just cut this back. So we cut it back almost all the way to the ground and just leave any new growth and it'll bush back out and be healthy. Okay, so all these old beans here are gonna come out. This basil I will probably go ahead and take out because I would like to replant it with some fresh stuff. So I'll take that. I'm gonna cut the artichoke down to the ground. That'll come back. A lot of my cherry tomatoes are actually still pretty healthy, so I'm not ready to bring all these out yet, but some of them are very sick. So we're just gonna pull out what is really sick and leave what's still producing pretty well. Like these sweet 100s down here, they look really rough. Like these, I'm just gonna pick everything that looks good and tear those out. Same thing with the big tomatoes, just taking out what looks bad. Now some things here are where Ben Turn replanted. So here we've got some cucumbers that are just coming in. Those are gonna be our fall cucumbers. So obviously those are staying. Oh, look at this. Look at that cluster of Barry's crazy cherries.
Yeah.
Y'all sitting in the shade of the roselle? Oh, we'll make some space in here. Some things like this roselle, I mean, this is just hitting its prime, so this is not gonna come out. Long cucumbers are still healthy and producing, so these are not gonna come out. Oh, we'll just come through and just make a call on each thing. We've got a lot of cucumbers that are dried up that need to come out. Here we've got some fall squash that were recently planted. Those haven't even started producing yet. What comes after this? I know I mentioned I'm gonna be putting in varieties that are frost tolerant. And that is anything in the brassica family can withstand a frost, and any root vegetables. Like those are two that you can know that you're safe with. Also things like peas, those can withstand being in freezing temperatures. Now, none of those things are gonna last whenever you get down like very, very, very cold, like a super hard freeze. But if you get stuff started early enough and it's acclimated, it can withstand a pretty good freeze. I also have fabric. I explained this before, but I think it really bears repeating because it is important information. The chart that we use in the United States for growing zones, like where I say I'm zone 7 and you might say I'm zone 5 or whatever your zone is, all that means, all that growing zone chart is based on is what the extreme low average temperature is for your region. That's why, like, I'm zone 7 and I have friends in Washington State that are zone 7 and friends in New York State that are zone 7 and friends in Arizona that are zone 7. It has a lot to do with your elevation. It has a lot to do with, you know, where you are in correlation to like the coast, and different things like that go into it. But it's just talking about your average low temperature. Here in zone 7 where I am, my first frost is usually the very beginning of November, and the coldest it gets in zone 7 on average is between 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like -17 and -12 Celsius. And there are exceptions to that. There have been times that it has gotten colder, but that is very unusual. Usually, in most cases, here where I live, the coldest that it ever gets is between 0 and 10. And with that said, there are a lot of things that I can grow, because kale, if with just a little bit, like a layer of frost fabric, it can survive 10 degrees Fahrenheit or -12 Celsius. Like it can survive that if it's covered. Now it'll die if it's not covered. Another thing I'm keeping in mind with what I'm choosing right now to come in is I'm probably going to plant more than I need, because I have a lot of seeds. Some of them are on the older side. Seeds are good for years, but they do lose germination capacity after a handful of years. And so at some point I'll just go ahead and plant them to make more plants and be able to save more seeds, so then I get fresh seeds. And since I have heard that we might be looking at seed shortages next year, and I have extra space beyond what we really strictly need for our own family's food needs, I'm thinking, well, I've got the seeds, I've got the space, and I've got the time. I'll just grow some extra plants, which I can save seeds of. And what do you think we should grow, Toby?
All watermelons.
All watermelons. It's the wrong time of year for that. Remember the cold weather things. What should we grow for cold weather things?
Peppers.
Nope, peppers are warm weather. Think of what we eat in the winter. Rutabagas, kale, lettuce, carrots, peas,
Oh, I like it.
collard greens, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli. Ooh, broccoli, your favorite.
No.
Toby does not love broccoli. Now, what we are going to do today, and I don't know if we'll be showing very much of it, we're just going to try to get it done, is anything that is in decent shape, that's dried up, maybe soft or a little rotty, gone to seed, that we're taking out, we'll save seeds, and then a lot of the scraps, they go to the pigs or to the goats. If they look diseased, like these tomato plants that look diseased, they go to the burn pile. You don't want to put disease in your compost. And like, I don't want to feed those diseased plants necessarily to my animals because I don't know how much of that disease might pass through them and end up in their bedding and their droppings, which are going to go into my compost. So the disease goes in the burn pile. Everything else goes to the animals, which inevitably leads to the compost. The one thing we do when we're taking like these big gourds off of here and anything that's like big and heavy and intertwined, because if you just start pulling on them, they don't let loose. They're too woven in. So we'll take snippers and just cut multiple places of the plant all over the trellis. So when you pull, you can actually yank off sections of it. I'll show you how this goes. Well, there we have it. So how are they once the skin's hard?
They're really not that bad.
They're not? Maybe we should save more than just a few of them.
It's pretty soft on the inside.
I bet I could peel them and still just cook them in a stew.
There's not that much of the skin, so it's like, it's not like a squash where there's like a really thick.
Yeah.
A lot of that's still
Well,
pretty
save
soft.
more than a few. Save
Okay.
the biggest, hardest ones for seeds, and then save me a handful of the others, and then anything that's small and soft. There are quite a few that are small and soft. Nana's over here picking tomatoes. How cool is she? All right, so you guys saw us clean that bed out on a time lapse, so you didn't see all of it, but start to finish, of course, Ben Turn started by pulling the other side of the sunflowers out while I was talking to you, and then we went and started pulling the rest of it out together. But it took about 10, probably 15 minutes to get this all out. And as you can see, we left the zinnias, but everything else is out. We cut the sunflowers off at the surface. Those massive sunflowers, their root systems are really, they're huge. And if you go to rip those out of your beds, especially if you have raised beds and the soil is really loose, you'll lose probably like 5 gallons of soil. And so I always just cut those off right at the surface and just plant around them in future years. They'll break down over the course of a year. So, oh, little bird almost flew right into me. So I wanted to show you guys kind of how I do some of my seed saving out here. So this is a cherry tomato. This is one of the sick plants, and it is blue gold berries is one of my favorite cherry tomatoes. And I know this plant's getting pulled out today. Now Nana is helping me pick the cherry tomatoes that we're going to eat or freeze or dehydrate, but I wanted to make sure that I got some and set them aside to save the seeds of them. So this it's just a little nursery pot. I filled this up with cherry tomatoes and set it aside for myself so I can take those in and save seeds. Also, I've got a handful of these purple whole peas that are good and dried, and so with a bean or a pea, we're actually going to save the bean or the pea, which is the seed of the plant, and you got to let them completely dry. So that's what these are, and I've just set them aside for the same reason. So I kind of keep a pile when I'm tearing the garden out of stuff that I want to save in a designated pile so it doesn't get mixed in with kitchen food or whatever. And then here I've got a flower head of a zinnia. Now I've showed you guys this before. One of the things that I like to do personally, this is a personal choice, some people would hate this, but when my flowers get dead heads on them and they're good and dry, and so I know this is full of seeds, I actually take these and just break them apart and throw them back in the garden beds because I like volunteer plants. I like the fact that this plot of zinnias that I'm leaving in, didn't plant those there. Those come back year after year because I've had zinnias in that exact same spot for 4 years now. But if you want to save the seeds, you just take these dead heads. You can put the whole dead head in a bag or split them up, and the seeds are down in here. You see these? Those are the little seeds that are in the head of that flower. So if I'm wanting to save some more zinnia seeds, I just grab those dead heads, and I usually leave them intact. I tore this one apart out here because I was showing you, but it's neater. I just leave the whole head intact and I'll stick it in a container. Sometimes if I'm really trying to label stuff, I'll keep a pen down here so that I can write down what it is that I took, or I'll put a note on my phone. You think you're gonna remember stuff, but let's be real. Hey, you found my Hori! Happy day, it was eaten by the Kakuzi squash. Oh, I've been missing this. As far as the mulch goes here, there are a couple options of what you can do. What I typically will do here before winter is actually save this mulch. I don't pull this out. I might move it aside if I'm gonna replant something here and amend the beds with some compost, or like just something sort of rich like blood meal or bone meal, and just sort of mix it in at the surface of the soil if I'm gonna plant some root vegetables, or maybe just like a bagged fertilizer. You can do that. I don't use just a whole lot of that because I have access to so much compost and manures, aged manures. But you just kind of move it aside, amend, plant, and when your seedlings come up, you just sort of push it back in the same direction. If you mulch with something like wood chips or hay, those break down more and they add more nutrients back to the soil because both of those things still have a lot of nutrients in them. However, straw is a byproduct of producing cereal grains. It's just an empty husk. It doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it, and so it breaks down slower, which is a benefit, especially if you're mulching through the winter, because it retains a lot of heat since it's hollow, but it doesn't add a lot to your soil. And so like next year when we amend these beds, we will move all this straw out and put compost back on, and then we just put the straw back on. Still works for mulch, but we'll have to add more straw at that point. All right guys, well, we are gonna get back to work. Thank you for hanging out with me. The next time you see this garden, it'll be looking pretty different, but it will be pregnant with the next season. So it's not a sad day. It's not a sad day. God bless you. Until next time.